Good morning. Happy Friday. Today we're talking about chapter 8 of my book, Real Women Change the World, Letting the Good Girl Die so the Real Woman Can Live. And the title of this chapter is on relationships. This, from my perspective, is one of the most powerful of the book because everything in our life is about relationship, our business, our relationship with ourselves, as well as our relationship with the people who come into our lives personally and professionally. Knowing how you do relationships in ways that support you and in ways that may sabotage or prevent your dreams from happening is really important. And so obviously this is just an overview, but I would really love to give you just a few notes of what's in the chapter in ways that I really hope this book can support you in growing to that level of being the real woman in real relationships and doing all of them. And again, most importantly, relationship with yourself in a way that allows you to become continuously the woman you hope to be. Because as we all know, we're always in the state of becoming. We're always in the state of learning and growing if we choose. It's an option. But if we don't grow forward, we stagnate. And if we stagnate, we really create all kinds of other issues. We eventually die. And we know too many people who are part of the walking dead. So we need to keep growing. We need to keep changing. We need to keep moving. And that comes from, as I said in earlier chapters, mindfulness and learning emotional intelligence. So as you're growing in mindfulness, as you're present, aware of what's happening at the moment, and as you are becoming more and more emotionally intelligent, more and more aware of how you respond and don't respond, hopefully in the arena of relationships, you'll have the ability to recognize when you are getting in your own way, when you are sabotaging things that are taking place. It happens for all of us. As children, our first relationships are with our parents or with our grandparents, whoever it is that raised us. Our first relationships are with them. And for most, our mothers taught us how to be women. And our fathers taught us how to be in relationships with men. Now, for some, that was a pretty healthy way to learn. For others, it was a very unhealthy way to learn. But that does not define, in and of itself, the good girl and the bad girl, and the good girl and the real woman. Because the good girl and the real woman can come out of any situation. It becomes a matter of choice. It becomes a matter of individuation, of separating away from your family. But first, you need to be aware of the impact your family had. You need to be aware of what happened. So in every home, no matter how functional or dysfunctional it is, children learn how to survive, and they learn how to survive each in their own way. There's a pattern when you study alcoholic systems. Say there are 5 children. One child, in dealing with the traumas of that home, zones out. It's like nobody's ever home. They just disappear. They walk through the house, not present. Absolutely not present. Another child acts out all the time because it's their way of drawing tension away from the conflicts perhaps between the parents. They act out because they need a break from all the fighting taking place in the house. Somebody else tries to appease everybody in order to make them happy. How can I make you happy? I will be perfect. I will do everything. I will cook dinner. I'll clean the house. Whatever anybody needs to make our parents happy, I will do it. Guess who that child becomes, all right? Another child struggles to be perfect. They become the perfect student. They become the perfect child. They become the perfect everything, brother, sister, everything, because they believe as if they are perfect, they are taking stress away from the family. So they take on this responsibility, this obligation of perfection in order to make things happen. And then in this unfortunately not just theoretical, but in this family of 5 children, the 5th becomes the one that behaves just like the acting out parent. They learn to model from that parent. So you have 5 children growing up in this home. And that home did not define how all 5 would be. They each come in with different personality styles and each developed coping skills and dealing with their situation. And even in a so-called healthy home, there are different mechanisms, because you know this. Children know what to ask mom, they know what to ask dad. They know when to ask mom and they know when to ask dad. Children figure out really early how to work the system. And so what happens is, as we become adults, if we don't recognize that the behavior patterns we learned, the relationship patterns we learned to live in that particular family, we start believing it's the way we enter relationships with everybody. And the fact is, everybody else has learned how to do relationships differently based on their family. So if as adults, we are going to enter relationships as business people or in personal relationships as adults, we need to take the time to recognize what I learned at home fit that home, but it may not fit the world. One of the things I learned as a young child is that everybody in the whole world had fish on Friday. That was just, it may seem simplistic, but in my upbringing, the entire world followed the same behavior patterns I was taught. The entire world went to confession every Saturday. The entire world went to Mass and Communion on Sundays. The entire world ate fish on Fridays. It wasn't, believe it or not, until I was 22 and an international airline stewardess that I learned everybody does it differently. It never crossed my mind there were people out there actually eating meat on a Friday. It never crossed my mind people out there didn't even know what confession was. All of these things, and this is our view of the world. And in my mind's eye, there's always somebody telling you exactly what to do and how to do it, because that was my upbringing. When I moved to New York City as an airline stewardess, and here I was, the only rules I had was to show up on time for my flights, to bid every month for wherever I wanted to fly in the world that next month. Did I want to go to Spain? Did I want to go to Portugal? Did I want to go to France? Where did I want to fly next month? And I just bid, as we all put in bids, to see which rounds we would get. Where would we be going? Those were the only rules I had in my life, which meant I needed to decide. And this is something that happens to every one of us, whether it happens post-high school, post-college, or in your first job. You need to decide, how are you going to live in a world that doesn't follow the guidelines your parents offered? How are you going to live in a world in which you have to create your guidelines, in which you have to recognize what you bring to the table, where you have to recognize what you're bringing into those relationships that you are developing? And you may find that the coping mechanisms you had as a child really get you into trouble as an adult. So what that means is, as an adult, you need to learn a new way. And it may have nothing to do with what you learned at home. Hopefully at home, you learned values. You learned a perspective that allowed you to walk tall in the world. But in terms of behavior patterns, those become developed as an adult. They actually helped you to begin to define the woman you want to be in the world. And it really means, in the most simplistic of ways, if as a child taking a temper tantrum got you what you wanted, guess what that does when you're an adult? It may get you what you want for a while, but eventually healthy people don't want to play and they walk away. If as a child you played helpless and everybody in the family pitched in and did it for you, they may have been complaining the whole time, but they did it for you. Guess what happens when you play helpless as an adult? Really, it becomes a way of you looking at, I am defining not only who I am in the world, I'm defining how I exist in the world in relationships to others. I'm defining what I am going to look like. And what ends up happening is that when you let the naivete that develops, the innocence that existed in your family home go, and you move into the adult world, you begin to recognize that you may be developing a whole new set of values in terms of what's right and wrong. One of the things I learned early was that we are all in this together. That's a value I have chosen to keep. Another value I learned early was that all the good people live in South Boston. If you don't live in South Boston, you don't have the same value we did. If you don't live in the housing projects, you're not real, you're not authentic. It was a value that was implemented and embedded in every one of us. The good people live in the projects. The good people are poor and struggling. Rich people are selfish. Many of you heard messages about that. But as an adult, if you keep those belief systems, think of how amazingly limited you're going to be. There are wonderful people everywhere. So some values you learned as a child, you keep. But what happens is we need to go through, as we build relationships in adulthood, to look at which values do I want to keep? Which values do I want to get rid of? Which values were based on a lie? Which values that I possess were actually authentically reflective of me and the woman I want to be in the world? It is an important point. Step back, truly look at who you are, look at who you want to be, look at how you want to confront the world, and go for it. Because we are absolutely free to define who we want to be. And for a woman like myself, I know coming from the housing projects, being a Catholic nun for a number of years, and 3 months after leaving religious life, moving to Manhattan as an international airline stewardess who in our day was sex symbols traveling the world. Lots of shifts, lots of cultural shocks and changes. And it really came down to there was goodness in every one of those stages. And there were difficulties in every one of those stages. So for all of us, it becomes, who do you want to be? Maybe you're post-divorce. Maybe you're leaving the corporate world and becoming an entrepreneur. Maybe you've been at home and now you're going back to work. Truly, you're at a beautiful point in your life of who do you want to be in relationship to the world you are now entering, to the world you are now defining as the place you want to be. How are you going to do that? If you hold on to that image, that self-image, that value system, that you need to be a good girl, that you need to be somebody that is always making everybody else comfortable, know that you will end up betraying yourself every step of the way. Know that as a good girl, the type of people you are going to bring in are either going to be the people who want absolute control, and they will tell you how to be. They will tell you how to behave. They will tell you how to look. They will tell you what to say and what not to say. And the more you enter an adult relationship with them, the more you disappear. Another kind of relationship that the good girl tends to enter is relationships with people she can help. It's one thing when she becomes a social worker and she's doing that professionally, she's helping, or she becomes a minister and she's helping. But when the good girl enters a relationship with a man or woman who she knows she could help, she loves them completely, she just wants to help them become who they're meant to be. Notice that what you are in love with is not who that person is. What you have become in love with is who you want them to be. Because the truth is, every one of us has infinite potential, but not every one of us chooses to develop our potential. So if, as the good girl leaves her home, and she continues to be the good girl, helping everybody because that's what she did in her home, she will be helping all the men or women she's in an intimate relationship with become the person she believes they are called to be. Think of how manipulative that is. I don't care if it appears to be the best of intentions. Think of how manipulative that is when you believe that you can help somebody else. They are so good except in these areas, and I can help them. There's an important thing for you to look at as well. When you are that focused on helping this other person become their best self, when are you looking at yourself? When are you growing? When are you expanding? When are you becoming who you truly want to be? You can't do that in a relationship if your focus is always on helping somebody else become their best self. It's their responsibility to become their best self. It's your responsibility to become your best self. And the objective in a relationship is not to go in to fix people. The objective of a relationship is that you're walking with somebody whose value systems match yours. We're walking with somebody whose ultimate goals match yours. They may have a very different career. They may have a very different way of getting there. One may be an entrepreneur. One wants to be CEO of a major corporation. Two very different mindsets when it comes to business. But if the objective is still the same, if a philanthropic element is there for the two of you or not there for the two of you, if your values are the same, it's simply the ways of getting there are different. By becoming partners, by becoming spouses, what you're saying is, I absolutely love who you are. And as you grow and develop, I want to grow and develop alongside you. I may not grow identically, but I want to continue. So both of us are continuously growing. Both of us are continuously becoming more and more of who we're meant to be. And we can do that because our basic worldview is the same and our values are the same. Nowhere in there does it say one person is in control. And nowhere in there is the one person helping the other become their best self. We support each other with difficulties that come up. But when one person has to disappear in order to help the other become their best self, we no longer have a relationship of two equal people. So take a look at how you do your relationships. Take a look at those people you model in relationship. What couples do you see out there that you think, I want to be like them? Who are they and what does that look like for you? And know that if you are not fully present in your own life, it's not going to work. It won't. Now, the real woman can also come from, speaking of her for a moment, if you will, changing topics. The real woman can also come from a dysfunctional home, and she can also come from a highly functional home. The difference is the real woman recognizes that she is called to live her journey. She recognizes that she is called to become the best woman she is meant to be. She is called to become everything that she's capable of being. And she wants to do that in partnership. Whether that is in her business, she's doing it in partnership with her vendors, in partnership with her employees. If she's in corporate, in partnership with those around her. But she recognizes that in order to get where she wants to go, being in relationship is the healthiest and most productive way to do that. And I'm not always talking just in an intimate, married or living together kind of relationship. I'm talking about any relationships we have with friends, with anybody, friendships with even with our children, friendships with people we work with, that becomes an acquaintance friendship level. It really becomes you deciding, how am I going to do this and how real do I want to be? But always for both. It requires you looking at the inner messages. To do it healthy, it requires you to see what is truth and what is it that I'm bringing into this relationship, because every relationship has problems. So if you can look at, because you've got two people coming from two very different places, trying to blend and recognizing that neither one of you has the right way. You both have a way, and you have to figure out how to blend that. So it's important to notice, what am I bringing in? At what point am I saying this is the right way? And what point am I saying this is a way? Because if I can own it's a way, I can respect and honor your way. When I know I'm doing it right, I'm not going to respect and honor yours unless you're doing it exactly as I am. So truly step back, take an assessment. Notice the messages you're bringing into the relationships you're in. Notice the right way to do things that you may believe in, and recognize it's probably not the right way. It truly is simply a way. Notice what your parents taught you. Again, this emotional intelligence, this reflection, this knowing I'm bringing me into my relationship, which means I'm bringing in all my experiences, good and bad. I'm bringing in all of my successes and all of my so-called failures. I'm bringing in all the wounds I've had from other relationships. All of that's coming into this relationship. So take a look, even in business, because in business you may expect that people are going to abuse you because you expect to be abused. Period. People are going to take advantage of you because you expect to be taken advantage of. So this stepping back and this looking at what are the beliefs I bring from home And what beliefs and expectations do I want to have as an adult? Notice some of the messages from home, and many of us have these. Your parent told you not to eat before meals, but how many of us have appetizers? How many of us, when we're at networking events, we have appetizers before dinner? We have whatever it may be. How many parents told you not to talk to strangers? And that if you're in business, you best talk to strangers all the time, or you won't be having a business. How many parents told you to never kiss on the first date? And how many of us have kissed on the first date at least once or twice? All right. So take a look at that. And also notice that our parents gave us other messages, or we interpreted their messages to say certain things. Some parents have said things such as, you'll never learn, you'll never listen, you'll never be good enough. And notice it's up to us to decide what messages we received that we want to keep as we go forward into our adulthood and into our new relationships. Because believe it or not, on those days when we're tired or wounded, we bring those old messages up and blame our partners for having them, even if our partner has never said anything similar to what our parents may have said to us. All right. So notice that, and notice again, truly, that our relationships are ours. Our relationships are what we make them to be. Recognize who you are. Recognize the messages, the beliefs, and all the so-called right ways that you bring in to your business, to your personal relationships, to your relationships with your children and with your friends, because we create the relationships we expect to see. We fit in the way we expect to fit in. We become as large an energetic footprint as we believe we have the right to be. And all of that depends on our own belief systems. So truly do, in reading this book, take a look. There's so much more material in there. Take a look at what are you doing? How are you doing your relationships now? What kind of partners do you bring in? Are you bringing in business partners that betray you? Are you bringing in relationship partners that betray you? Guess what your expectation is? Are you bringing in people who absolutely support you that, yes, you will argue with? Welcome to humanity. But do they argue with you about a problem? Or do they argue with you about you? Take a look at that. The real woman argues about a problem. She wants a solution to a problem. And when she's angry, it's because she's probably frustrated and can't find a solution to a problem. She's not going to attack a person. The person isn't the issue. There's a problem that can't be resolved. And that's what you deal with. The good girl, because she has the one right way to do everything, tends to attack a person because he or she is not doing it the right way. And again, because she's working so hard to do it right, she ends up sapping herself. So do take a look. I'll stop here. There's so much more I could say. But notice that who we intrinsically are. We are intrinsically holy. We are intrinsically good. We are absolutely unlimited in so many, many ways. But it's up to us to take a look at who it is we want to be. It's up to take a look at how we're going to do our world. It's up to us to decide, how do we want to approach life? How do we want to approach our relationships? How do we want to approach ourselves as we go forward in this world? My wish for you is that you approach yourself, you approach your relationships, intimate and otherwise, in a way that brings in people who support you, being your best you, and always calling you to become so much more of what you're capable of being. And thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you next week.